Whodunits have held a special place in the hearts of readers for over a century, weaving tales of mystery, intrigue, and cunning detective work. From the early works of Agatha Christie and her contemporaries during the Golden Age to modern-day adaptations like Knives Out, this genre has evolved, yet remained a constant in literature and pop culture. We're going to take a look at the history of the whodunit and how murder mysteries have evolved and grown into a full-fledged genre over time. Let's get into it. It all, kind of unsurprisingly, starts with Edgar Allan Poe. Poe is widely considered to be the father of the modern detective story. His 1841 short story, The Murders in the Rue Morgue, introduces a character who solves the mystery by analyzing the facts of the case. It's the reclusive genius C. Auguste Dupin. Dupin comes across a newspaper report about a gruesome double murder in the Rue Morgue, with bizarre and seemingly impossible circumstances. Over the course of the story, Dupin deduces that the murderer must possess superhuman strength and inhuman ferocity. He also learns that the hair found at the crime scene is not human. Spoilers coming. Dupin concludes that the killer is an orangutan. This first whodunit introduced us to some of these plot points that would soon become tropes of the genre. The twist ending, the brilliant detective, and the mystery that was sure to stump even the keenest-eyed of readers. Poe called these types of stories tales of ratiocination, meaning tales of logical reasoning, as Dupin showcases his keen powers of observation to solve the mystery. Moreover, he's not relying on supernatural powers or anything like that. Dupin returned for a few more of Poe's stories, but more importantly, his character archetype quickly became a blueprint for fictional detectives and their stories. So jumping ahead to 1887, and Arthur Conan Doyle, a name you might be familiar with, publishes A Study in Scarlet, featuring the detective work of one Sherlock Holmes, a name you are certainly familiar with. Throughout this story, Doyle was drawing on many of the things that Poe installed in his character Dupin. The penchant for brilliance, the idiosyncrasies, that kind of thing. And soon enough, Sherlock Holmes quickly became the face of the detective novel genre, as Arthur Conan Doyle wrote over 50 short stories and books featuring that character. During this time period, detective novels further developed some of those trademark techniques and features that would come to define the genre. Many authors used this recurring detective character across their books, and they used tools like red herrings and developed stories that gave the reader the ability to figure out the crime alongside the detective. This gave reading these stories a very satisfying feeling to readers. Speaking about developing Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle wrote, "I was educated in a very severe and critical school of medical thought, especially coming under the influence of Dr. Bell of Edinburgh, who had the most remarkable powers of observation. He prided himself that when he looked at a patient, he could not only tell their disease, but very often their occupation and place of residence. Reading some detective stories, I was struck by the fact that their results were obtained in nearly every case by chance. I thought I would try my hand at writing a story in which the hero would treat crime as Dr. Bell treated disease, and where science would take the place of chance." As detective novels grew in maturity and popularity, a subgenre emerged that focused not only on the solving of the crime, but also on the mystery surrounding the identity of the perpetrator. And this subgenre became known as the whodunit. So from there, moving from the early stages of detective stories and into the age of the whodunit, the mystery novel, and by extension the whodunit subgenre, reached the zenith of its popularity. This was around the early 20th century, and it was being read avidly around the Western world. This period saw many now iconic writers churning out top-quality murder mysteries, including G.K. Chesterton, Dorothy L. Sayers, Marjorie Allenham, and Mary Roberts Rinehart. Notably, this golden age of the whodunit was dominated by female authors, and most notably, the queen of crime herself, Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie first published in October of 1920, and until her final publishing in 1973, Agatha Christie possesses one of the greatest careers of any writer in history. She began writing during her time working as a nurse in the First World War. After the conclusion of the war, she published her first detective novel, and in doing so, created the character who would quickly become the central figure of her works, Detective Hercule Poirot. From then on, she published at least a book a year until her death. Her whodunit novels were by far her most famous works, and a defining part of the golden age of the whodunit, as she quickly became a master of the style. Both due to the excellence of her work and the sheer number of books she published, Agatha Christie still stands as the best-selling novelist of all time, only beaten out in total sales by Shakespeare and the Bible. So during this golden era, many of the tropes of the genre would be further defined. For instance, authors developed a predilection for fantastic casts of characters and the backdrops of the British countryside, or these tremendous secluded houses that you often see. Other tropes included authors actively working to mislead the reader before revealing the least likely suspect as the murderer. However, it wasn't just unwritten rules on how to write a whodunit. Ronald Knox actually wrote down his what he called 10 commandments for the whodunit genre and how to write an effective detective story. He codified his thoughts as part of the Deduction Club, which was a social club of British mystery writers, including some of the aforementioned Knox, Sayers, Chesterton, and of course Agatha Christie herself, along with dozens of others. I won't go through all 10 of the rules, but feel free to follow the link in the description to read more about that. Some of the most notable rules include all supernatural or preternatural agencies are ruled out as a matter of course. No accident must ever help the detective, nor must he ever have an uncountable intuition, which proves to be right. And twin brothers and doubles generally must not appear unless we have been duly prepared for them. I love these rules. They give us as readers a picture into how these writers define the genre in their own way. The whodunit was certainly not science fiction. It certainly wasn't fantasy. It was more like an intricate puzzle that must be fairly drawn out through the course of the novel, bringing the readers alongside. Never misleading the reader in an inordinate way, just staying exactly one step ahead. These prolific whodunit writers of the early 20th century created an incredible golden age of the genre, one which lasted until the Second World War, which is when the attention of the public shifted to other, arguably more pressing matters. In the decades following World War II, whodunits, as they were presented during the Golden Age, began to fade a little bit in popularity. They made way for what we now know as the genre of hard-boiled crime fiction. This subgenre was hallmarked by being a lot tougher and a lot less cozy. Think of the motif of the hard-smoking, womanizing, noir-set detective. That's the face of this new take on the detective novel. That's not to say that whodunits in the classic sense weren't being written. Christie and others continued to publish their works, and it was during these decades of the 40s, 50s, 60s that the public was treated to the first ever murder mystery board game, Clue, or across the pond known as Cluedo. This game was relatively successful at first, but over the years has aged very well and is now considered one of the great board games. Over the 20th century, the whodunit genre both evolved significantly and stayed very similar. As new generations of whodunit writers emerged in the 1980s, and then again in the 2000s and 2010s, these authors stayed true to many of the iconic tropes that readers came to love, while also experimenting heavily, generating new and innovative takes on the genre. Consider Barbara Vine's 1987 novel A Fatal Inversion, which uses the familiar setting of the British countryside we talked about to tell a mystery story, but it also experiments with plot devices like flashbacks and time jumps. Or Anthony Horowiz's 2016 Magpie Murders that tells an extremely Christie-esque story. You have the elements of the idiosyncratic detective, a peculiar cast of characters, and a story full of red herrings. However, this whodunit evolves the genre by using a story within a story format to reach its conclusion, as the main character attempts to solve a modern-day mystery using a whodunit manuscript that was left unfinished by the author. This reader gets to read both stories as they progress throughout the book, and it's really a treat. Other modern authors include Louise Penny, Tana French, and Richard Osman. These authors' contemporary takes on the whodunit have reinvigorated the genre, ensuring its continued popularity and relevance in the 21st century. The whodunit genre has also had a rich history in movies and TV. Film adaptations have played a pretty big role in shaping the whodunit genre and introducing it to a wider audience. From the countless Agatha Christie's adaptations and re-adaptations, but probably best not to dwell on some of those, to original takes on the story like the Clue movie, and even movies that do away with some of the more contrived whodunit tropes in favor of a laser focus on the twists and turns. Think something like The Usual Suspects. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the whodunit mystery video games, such as The Curse of the Obra Dinn, the Ace Attorney series, and how it's influenced some of the Batman Arkham series as well. In recent years, films like Knives Out and its sequel Glass Onion have recaptured the attention of the public and revitalized the mania around the whodunit genre. All this is not to say that whodunits are without flaws. The genre has been much and fairly criticized for the author's tendency to do away with character development in favor of just focusing on the plot. As noted by Carolyn Crampton of the She Done It blog, lots of Golden Age authors either neglected or ignored their characters, peopling their books instead with two-dimensional stereotypes and focusing purely on the puzzle. Other than the recurring detective, the cast of whodunit is often just stereotypical, shallow characters who just exist to drive the plot along. With this said, recent whodunits have made strides to alleviate this. Look to the supporting cast of Knives Out. It's filled with big personalities, that's pretty typical, but notably these characters have more depth, and they have more things going on than the typical supporting cast. On top of this, modern authors have focused on bringing takes to the genre that feature more diverse narrators, settings, stories, and perspectives. Jules Simon writes, "Our penchant for murder has always been a source of inspiration for many stories crafted throughout the centuries. We've gathered quite the collection of tales of war and savagery, bloodshed and violence, but also of love and friendship, of fantastical creatures and adventurous quests, and perhaps the most enduring genre of them all is, to this day, the whodunit. Whodunnits have a long and rich history, and likely will continue to be relevant and engaging. There's something fun about turning each page, learning more about the mystery, and ultimately being satisfied by the end of the book. As our curiosity drives us, and we seek to be more fascinated, or are just looking for a fun fiction read, Whodunnits will continue to be a mainstay of the literature world. I know I don't plan on giving them up anytime soon. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of the whodunit genre. If you enjoy pieces like this, I have a newsletter called Threadlines where I'm writing about business, sports, media, and all things in between. You can get it delivered to your inbox by subscribing at threadlines.co. Again, threadlines.co. I'm also going to be posting video essays right here on YouTube, so you can subscribe here for more. I'll see you guys in the next one.